So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I am delighted to be joined again by Dr. Rita Brock. Rita is the Senior Vice President of Moral Injury Programs at Volunteers of America. I am just delighted to have her with us today. You'll also see on the panel, we have some facilitators as well as volunteers that are going to help us in our demonstration. We're going to be doing a demo as part of today's presentation. So thank you so much to Anna, Robert, Ida, Kiara, and Amber, who are going to be helping us out today. And you'll get a chance to meet them later on in the presentation when we start the demo. So Rita, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Next slide, please. So here's the agenda for our 90 minutes. I'm going to do a quick review of the definition of moral injury because I'm not assuming that everyone here today was able to make the first webinar. And it always is helpful to me to have a reminder, even if I did see something several weeks ago about what was covered. So I'm going to do a review of moral injury. I'm going to talk about some of the interventions that might be helpful in addressing moral injury in people, in yourselves and in clients you may be working with. And then we will have a demonstration of an online program that we offer free to the public. It's something that you can use in your own practice yourself, or you can even, if you think you've got somebody, an adult who might be experiencing moral injury or moral distress, something they could also sign up to use online. We're going to have a demo of that, and then there'll be time for a discussion of what you just witnessed. That's the agenda for the day. Next slide, please. So moral injury is basically a form of moral conflict. And moral conflict is just an ordinary human experience. When it's discomforting, when something happens and we feel it twinge and we think, oh, I need to do something about this because something got messed up in a relationship or whatever, that is a form of harm. It might not be serious harm, but there's something that went wrong. Then we do something to resolve it so that we can maintain those relationships. And that is practically a daily occurrence for many of us. You step on somebody's foot in the line, you say something rude, or you're a little bit irritated and short on sleep and you say something that you're sorry you said. Those are forms of moral discomfort. Your conscience is sort of tapping on you saying, hey, that wasn't okay. And so that's a normal thing. If though the thing that happened might be a bigger harm than you expected, or you can't figure out what the right thing to do is in a situation, or you can't fix it after the harm is done, it might start to bother you a lot. So moral distress is the term for that. It's a moral discomfort that is acute enough to interfere with your daily functioning. And that might be because it keeps you up at night and you're losing sleep over it, or certain times of the day it comes back and it worries you. That's moral distress. And a lot of people, in fact, I think practically 100% of the people that lived through the pandemic had some form of moral distress going on because it was just so difficult, especially the second wave. That was what got to me. First wave, I was being plucky and trying to make it through. When the second wave hit, I was like a gut punch. So that's moral distress. And if it accumulates, like if you're in a situation where over and over it isn't clear what the right thing to do is, like a lot of healthcare workers when the pandemic started didn't know what it was and they were struggling to save people and had no idea how to do it, that kind of moral distress can accumulate to the point that you actually break. And that's when you're in a deep state of moral injury. It's when the suffering you're experiencing from your moral distress now attacks your identity. Like you feel like you're not a good healthcare worker anymore because you can't save anybody and they're all dying and your whole job is to save people. Or you may decide that you can't be trusted to do the right thing because so much went wrong. And it will affect your relationships because it affects your core sense of your self-worth and identity. And that core sense of self and your moral conscience is connected to a meaning system that tells you right from wrong. And when that meaning system can't negotiate all the ambiguities and difficulties you're facing, you can really just kind of fall apart and give up on yourself, give up on a career you loved, even give up on your own life. So moral injury is a profound kind of anguish and suffering that threatens core identity and meaning. That's what moral injury is. Next slide, please. So here it's related to trauma and PTSD, but it's not the same thing. So trauma is, this is one definition, is intense emotional response to some overwhelmingly harmful event. And that overwhelmingly harmful event can be recurrent. It can be like being abused or a violent parent, so trauma can not just be one catastrophic thing, but chronic. And the after effects of that experience lead to emotional responses that make one unpredictable, or it changes your relationships. You may you not be yourself or seem yourself to people. And you can have physical symptoms that are like nausea and insomnia with trauma. And trauma is also, unfortunately, a pretty ordinary experience for a lot of people. PTSD is one kind of response we have to trauma, especially to trauma that was of a magnitude that we thought we were going to die, some cataclysmic, fear terrorizing event. And so it's the problem with PTSD is that, like trauma, the feelings of the thing itself haunt you. So your fear center goes into overdrive. You can't manage to go out because you're afraid of certain things and you don't want to be triggered. You don't want to re-experience the terrible thing that happened to you, which is one symptom of PTSD is flashbacks or nightmares or things like that. And even loss of memory. Sometimes the fear is so intense you can't remember the thing very well. And that's PTSD. Moral injury is not either of those, but you can have moral injury and have both of those things being going on with you. Moral injury is your conscience responding and evaluating the precipitating experience, the trauma or the moral violation. And it may not involve either trauma or PTSD. I know people who just imagine doing something that freaked them out. But if you don't address moral injury, it can also inhibit your getting better from a mental health disorder. And moral injury is different from PTSD and trauma. It's not a mental health problem. It's really more of a conscience or spiritual or philosophical problem. It's really your soul at risk because you feel no longer like you're a good person worthy of love, or you're so angry about being betrayed by someone who harmed you that you've lost connection to your best self. And so the kind of emotions that characterize moral injury are not fear-based. They're things like shame and guilt and outrage or remorse. And there's a lot of grief also in moral injury. So while it's not a psychological disorder, because it actually is an appropriate moral reaction to a terribly devastating experience, or being morally harmed by someone. So that being angry about that or feeling guilty, these are normal moral responses. It means the pain you're carrying means you have a conscience. So it's not something like in psychiatry where someone comes with a disorder like PTSD and you have protocols that have been tested, you have ways to try to help the person recover. With moral injury, you actually have to begin with accepting that whatever happened actually did happen. It's really admitting the reality of the situation is the beginning of the processing. Next slide, please. So this is we call this the pie chart. We've used it so much. Bill Nash created this sometime in 2017, I think, for a conference we held at Volunteers of America at Princeton and in New Jersey. And so he's let me use it ever since. It's a really good picture of all the parts of the person, the core sense of who they are, all these things that make a person have an identity and feel like a worthy human being. These are all impacted by moral injuries. So with emotions, you have an inability to get to any kind of love or pleasure or joy because you're feeling so much shame or anger or even contempt or cynicism. Those can also be a product of moral injuries, just being cynical about everything. and not being able to trust anything. So the relationships you usually have where you can trust people to have your back, take care of you, and love you, those get lost because you're not able to trust. And people will sometimes self-isolate because they believe that what is inside them is so awful they don't want anyone to know about it, which means they're not emotionally available. And so there's a break in relationships. And some people may even feel they're unforgivable. And self-concept. You're not good, can't be trusted, you're a failure, you're hopeless. Those are often signs of moral injury. And then the concept of the world, I said, that's a meaning system, right? Concept of the world. It can be a faith too. So that gets also disrupted. And people can stop believing in things that sustain them before the moral injury happened. And then they also have such intense feelings that they often lose the capacity to have authority or the personal discipline not to explode in anger when it's inappropriate to do that. So loss of authority over self. And because it's an act of conscience, moral injury may not surface right away. In fact, if you have PTSD and you can't remember the event very well, you have therapy that helps you put the event together piece by piece, and then you have a memory of it, you may be better in your PTSD symptoms, but suddenly experience moral injury because you suddenly realize, oh, I was the person who shot. I didn't remember that. So the continuity over time with moral injury is unstable, and people can push it aside and shove it down the way we can when our conscience bothers us in order to put one foot in front of the other and keep working and doing things, or they may even overwork to exhaustion to avoid those feelings of moral injury, but they're still there. It's just unpredictable when there's time for them to surface and be processed. Next slide, please. So this is Bill Nash himself speaking about moral injury. Just a little bitty clip he did for us, but I think it captures from the point of view of a psychiatrist. He was a Navy psychiatrist for 30 years. He was with the VA in Los Angeles for 4 or 5 years. He's been a professor of psychiatry and psychology, and he's one of the leading researchers and experts on moral injury. He now is a consultant to the United Nations Office of Operations, Office of Operational Support. Excuse me. And so this is his video. It's very short, but his capturing, I think, of the way moral injury is so key to our sense of who we are. So let's play the video.
To make the wounded. Moral injury is damage to a person from experiencing something that violates deeply held moral expectations. And moral expectations are something that, although ministers and theologians and philosophers have been interested in for a long, long time, it's kind of a new thing for healthcare professionals and other caregivers to consider. There's really, moral expectations are right at the very core of who we are as people and who we are as societies. It's what we build our lives on. It's what matters. It's what we value. It's what we love. It's our system of love. And we love the things that we look up to and work toward, are willing to serve, and in some cases die for. And I think there's good evidence that we are all hardwired from before birth to try to embody goodness, morality, love, compassion, empathy, caring. We all know that those are the right things. They give us joy. And if life were lived somewhere other than here on this very earthly planet, maybe we could pull that off for a lifetime. But of course, nobody can. Of course, life brings us to our knees over and over again because we can't always meet our own moral expectations, and others can't always meet our moral expectations. And then the challenge is, okay, now what?
So that Bill Nash's question, now what, is what we're moving to next. What is the answer to the now what? Next slide, please. And we're going to do an intervention that we use. We created in 2017 a pilot program for military veterans that was tested and it's now considered evidence-based. And we use what we learned from that program to create a series of different kinds of programs during the pandemic that weren't in person, because our program was in person and we had to think about online and how much time do people really have to be online. And so we've been working on these interventions, and there are some things we've learned from this process. One is that creating and being a non-judgmental context or person. So being non-judgmental, listening compassionately, and accepting what the person says so that it can be validated and made real, spoken out loud, that is really helpful for moral injury. Coming to a situation where a person feels like they're going to be analyzed, diagnosed, or fixed tends to silence people, to shut them down. And we learned that from our own veterans, that when they came to our groups and went through our program, where we really emphasized deep listening, deep compassionate listening, and validation of others' feelings, and accepting them, that they told us that they had shared things in their groups they would never have told their therapist, because they just didn't feel safe saying those things. Some of the things were awful. And they didn't feel safe saying those things to a therapist. So that sense of lack of judgment, that you're not, the person is not being judged because they already are judging themselves very negatively. They don't need that. So that sense of compassionate listening is important. Then it's just explaining to someone you think might be struggling with moral injury, and explaining it as a normal response to harm, having committed it or experiencing it, you can sometimes feel people relax or light go on in their eyes, because it sort of focuses something that's a vague misery in them. So explicit descriptions of moral injury or moral distress can be really helpful to people who are suffering it. And we use a peer support process for all of our programs, partly because when we train people to facilitate the groups, they are in the groups as members. They're not there sitting outside as an expert making the process happen. They're actually members of the group. And we invite them, if people in the group are hesitant to share their moral distress or moral injury, the facilitators are prepared to sort of start the process by sharing themselves, because they have been trained to know how to do that without using the group to fix them or help them, but to actually demonstrate what being vulnerable means. And so peers are really useful that way. It's also the case that, especially in certain closed culture groups like first responders and military veterans, they don't trust anyone outside the group to understand what they go through. So for those special groups, we actually have groups for veterans, and we have a whole different website for first responders. They know that they'll be in there with facilitators and other people who get their work and have walked in their shoes. And so that's another way that we find peers very helpful, is that for people who are reluctant even to share, even in what seems like a safe group, because they are afraid that what they've been through, they won't understand. So that's also helpful. It breaks their isolation, and they know that they'll get empathy from people who have walked in their shoes. And then and I think this is another important element of what we do. We do a very formal process. We have scripts for all our programs, so the facilitators train to use the script so that they don't forget anything and they don't need to ad lib or add things. It's a very structured, formal process that is what I call ritualized. So it's the same every time. If you go to one of our online groups that's called REST, in that REST program that we're about to demonstrate for you, the same format will apply every time. And that format is like, it holds people in a space where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they may have been there before, and they know what that structure is going to be, and they can trust it, and it won't change. And there's something about that structure, that holding of the ritual, that also creates that group peer process, that where the whole group feels like a unit and they get each other through the change. So it isn't on individuals to change themselves from feeling miserable to feeling better. It's like the whole group just goes through a process. And we have people say, well, I don't know how you did this, but I feel a lot better, because they didn't feel like they did it themselves. And there's something about the ritual structured formal process that I think makes that easier to happen in a group. And so that's another element of an intervention. And even if you're a therapist, you can create a slightly formal ritualized process of beginning and ending a session. And I know therapists that do this. And that can give people a sense of closure and a sense of that this is a thing that's going to happen and we have to go through it. The other thing about the group environment, why we use groups rather than one-on-one processes, is that the group itself delivers a sense to people that maybe some of the worst things they ever did or happened to them have value to other people. So it's not so awful that it may even change their perspective on what happened to them, that they need to tell it because other people can benefit. So it's also like that. It helps them accept the morally injurious experience in a way that other people also can accept it as not entirely negative. So those are all processes for working with moral injury that I think are really, really helpful to people. Next slide, please. So the demonstration you're about to see, I'm going a little long, I'm going to go fast, is called Resilient Strength Time. It's 1 hour online. It's confidential, free, and open to the public. And it's peer facilitated. The groups are usually no more than 10. I think we've had a couple that were 11. There's usually a wait list if it's up to 10. And if you show up, if you're on the wait list, you can usually get in. They're at different times of the week, and you just register for an account, look at the schedule, and sign up. So I'm going to turn it over now to Robert Hernandez and Anna Darzens. And this demonstration is exactly what I told you. It'd be a sort of ritualized format. And they're peer facilitators. Robert was a veteran in the earliest program of that pilot we ran. Robert was the guinea pig that had to run that program with his co-facilitator without ever having gone through it. So we trained the facilitators that had to do it first, but they didn't get to go through it. So no one knew what was going to happen. And it was miraculous what Robert and his partner Melissa were able to pull off in every group they ran, not just the first one. And Anna Darzens came into the program to learn how to run it and also to facilitate. And so Robert works for the VA as a peer support specialist. Anna works for VOA, Volunteers of America in Sacramento. And she's finishing a doctorate in social work, right? Anna, is that correct? Yeah. And so both of them have extensive experience in peer facilitation, and they're going to run our demonstration for us. And I'm just going to turn it over to them, and we're going to just start.
And may I say, Dr. Brock, not my doctorate, my MSW.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our REST group. I'll be your peer facilitator, Robert, and joining me as my co-facilitator is Anna. So yeah, at this moment, if you're going to participate, I'll ask you to go ahead and turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And before we get started, just make sure usually our names are all on there, so that's good. So, and then for everyone else who's not participating, just make sure you mute yourself, okay? So we're going to start with an icebreaker, just to introduce ourselves. So I'm going to ask you guys, if you were a weather report, what would you be? And feel free to go ahead and raise your hand or go ahead and speak. Who would like to start? Go ahead, Amber.
If I were a weather report, I would probably be a little drizzle with like slight chance of rain with an outcome of sunny weather after.
All right, thank you.
I would be similar to what the weather is in New York today, which is around mid-50s with a little bit of a cloudy sky. And like Amber said, also with the chance of a sunny afternoon.
Nice.
I will be a little cloudy, but sunshine in the afternoon. No rain in the outlook.
And what about you?
So I'm in California and we have a lot of rainy weather. So I'm going to stay away from the rain, but I feel kind of like there's so much to do on this Friday that it's very, very windy. So let's say warm, but really windy today.
Nice. And, you know, same. I'm out here in California as well, and actually, I'm here towards the coast, and I got a little bit of sun, so I'm gonna say a little sunny, but a little cloudy as well. But because you never know. But you know, I'm looking forward to the sunshine and some dry weather. So, thank you guys for sharing that. All right, so we created rest to reduce the moral distress, which can happen because you're overwhelmed, aren't able to meet your expectations for yourself, are isolated, you feel unsupported by others. You may feel things like sadness, shame, guilt, anger, fear because you aren't able to perform at your best. You may feel you're letting others down, or you cannot do enough. You may also have observed others engaged in harmful behaviors that bother you. Rest is a chance to share your distress and feel less alone. Sharing can help with the pain you're feeling, uh, and being with others who understand can help you maintain your sense of self-worth, and stay committed to what matters to you most. So during this time together, if you feel a need for one-on-one support, or more time to talk to someone, I'm going to put some phone numbers later on the chat, so you can call later. I'm also going to share a larger resource document. You can access it by clicking the docs button on the top of the screen. So we have a few important guidelines that I just share with our members as they join our group. Rest groups are confidential. Everything shared with the group members stays here. When you're sharing, focus on your experiences and feelings, okay? If you don't feel like sharing, that is okay. You can participate by listening and supporting others. Rest uses a process we call deep listening. It means we listen with an open heart and a quiet mind. Seek to emphasize and accept the person sharing and their feelings. Listen without needing to judge, evaluate, or challenge what you hear. Show when you are moved, and emphasize what you hear by placing your hand over your heart. And Anna, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Robert. I'm going to take us into belly breathing. We use belly breathing because it slows your heart rate, lowers your stress, and helps you focus on the present. It helps you listen without distractions. This breathing can be done anytime you feel stressed. We're going to do a few belly breaths together now as a group. I invite you to put both your feet on the floor and sit up in your chair, not leaning back or forward or side to side. Just sit relaxed. Don't slouch, but don't sit relaxed, but don't slouch. Put your hand on your belly so you can feel it rise and fall. You can close your eyes if you want, or you could just lower your eyes and soften your gaze so that you're not focusing on anything in particular. After we complete this process, I will move us into a meditation. So I just want to mention, please be sure to have an upright back with a slight curve in your spine just above your hips. You want your belly to have room to expand. Hold your head straight so your ears are in line with your shoulders and your hips. we'll do 3 breaths together. Inhaling through your nose to a count of 4 as you push your belly out, and then hold it for 3 seconds, and then exhaling from your mouth as you count to as we count to 8. You pull your belly in. It can be helpful to make a slight sound like a sigh or a hum as you exhale to help control the speed of the exhale. So here we go. Please breathe in through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Hold. Now breathe out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Once again, please breathe in through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Hold. Now breathe out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time, please. Please breathe in through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Hold. Now breathe out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm going to guide us through a meditation. I will say come back to the group when the meditation is over. I'm going to take pauses in between in between statements, and so that we all have an opportunity to feel the effect of each step. So feel the weight of your body on your chair. Keep breathing regularly at your own pace and close your eyes. Notice your feet on the floor, touching the floor. Notice your legs against the chair, the pressure of the chair on your legs. Notice your hips and abdomen. Let them relax. Notice your shoulders and arms. Let them relax. Notice your neck and throat. Let them relax. Soften your jaw. Let your facial muscles be soft. Now think back to what you were feeling when you logged on a few moments ago. What would you like to share that brought you to this meeting? Please take a breath, and when you're ready, return to the group. I hope everyone's doing okay. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Robert to do the process the sharing.
Ooh, all right. So we're going to open it now to the sharing time. I'm going to call on you by the order of it is on the on my screen right now. If you're not ready to speak just yet, just pass and I'll come back to you. If you don't want to participate either, that's fine as well. And if during this time you have a concern or question, please raise your hand on the screen and or use the raise hand screen as your option on Zoom. Okay. So I'm going to start with Kiara. Did I say that right?
Yes. I think it was really good to let go of some physiological tension that was in my body today. I think prior to the start of this session, I was feeling like a rapid heartbeat and a little tightness in my chest, and just like overall a little bit of anxiety related to just the workload I have this week with school and work. So I think this exercise was really good for grounding. This is something I've done before with the breathing, as well as kind of like feeling your feet on the floor and feeling yourself in the space. So I think it kind of brought me back to being present, and I feel like physiologically my body is a lot calmer than it was 5 to 10 minutes ago.
Thank you. Ada. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
You know,
I feel more calm right now. I started really anxious because I don't like being on camera, but it relaxed me enough where I could feel that I could talk and share and just be myself. It also helped me with my, just like Kiara said, I was, my heart rate was racing like 90 or 90 or 100. But it relaxed, my heart rate went down, and I feel very relaxed.
may I go next?
Yes, Anna, go ahead.
I appreciate all of your shares. Thank you so very much. I've been really struggling. COVID had been very stressful for myself because I'm responsible for all these lives at work, in 100 lives, and then plus working with all the staff who look to me to keep everyone safe and calm, because that's my job, is keeping everybody calm and centered. And then coming home, my mom is 84 and she has dementia and heart failure and kidney failure, and being horrified that I was going to bring something home to her, to now feeling a lot more at ease about COVID, but really struggling with her decline, and finding myself avoiding her, like overworking to avoid her, because coping with I kind of almost call it like dead man walking, right? That my mom is here, but it's not really my mom, and that's too horrific to deal with than to just go to work and deal with some of the most traumatic situations in our community. And so I run to it. I run to it like a firefighter runs to it. Sure, no problem. I can come in. I can take care of it. I got it. And so I feel like, oh, I'm letting her down and losing time, but I don't know how to cope with um, her fragility and my inability to do something about it. Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, Anna. Where would you like to share next?
I can share. I can relate to Anna's wanting to be out of a space where it's too much for ourselves. So we run to work or somewhere else where we feel like we can do valuable work, even though we know that at home needs us too. I've been overcoming or sort of navigating stuff that's happened in my childhood with my own family members where I don't feel where I don't feel validated myself in those spaces. So I've been trying to find spaces that do validate things that were traumatic in my own past. So I've been trying to not only speak the things that happened to me, but also acknowledge that they happened. Because a lot of the time because it's such a young age and we don't necessarily think bad things can happen to small children. Things do happen, and it's acknowledging and validating that space for that child that has now grown up and has not been able to acknowledge or speak on what happened to them. So I've been navigating that and navigating the consequences of some actions that don't necessarily benefit me, but were a consequence of that trauma that was sort of bubbling underneath the surface. And like Anna, I feel like I've run to work and I've ran to things that keep me occupied just because I feel like I don't want to feel those feelings yet. But this grounding exercise actually has helped me to sit in the moment, even if it's just for this moment, and make me realize that I can still survive. And I am a survivor of that, and that I've gotten this far is already a testament that I can go even further.
Thank you, Amber. So for me, um, work and my life is kind of a constant battle. I'm trying to find a balance in all this stuff that I do because I do have to drive a ways and traffic. If you guys know, LA traffic is it's pretty bad. So, um, I work for the VA and the Department of Veteran Affairs, and recently I lost two veterans that we were helping getting housed and everything like that. It brings back some memories for me, of loss when I was in Iraq and stuff like that. And kind of the feelings that what I go through is that feeling of keep pushing, right? So I have to stay busy. I have to, make sure I'm still working because I can't let it fall on the next guy that I'm going to help. So these, when we do these groups, it gives me that moment to kind of stop and breathe and do a check-in with myself, and I try to do that every time. And people are surprised of how calm I am sometimes because we always forget to stop for a minute. We always forget to just, what, let me take care of myself. Let me just stop and breathe for a minute. I just got this news and figure out, what I can do for the next person, or for myself, or from my parents. You know, my mom is a cancer survivor as well. So it's one of those things that she's in remission right now. And I've been taking care of her. And since my dad passed away, I've been that I've been pretty much my dad in this situation. So it's just like I said, it's just these balances. So I've been taking care of her bills, making sure she's taken care of, making sure everything's already paid off. I just bought her a bed. I bought her a new dresser and everything, so she's very happy. But it's one of those things that I had to do for her, you know, because she really wouldn't do it for herself. So you know, it's tough to have that balance, you know, to be good, to be there for our clients and the people that we help, and to be there for your family as well. But then you have to be there for yourself as well too, because if you're not there for yourself, I keep telling myself this, and I don't know how I'm doing it, but I'm doing it. Um, is if I'm not there for myself, I can't be there for anybody else, you know. And it's always about taking that moment to stop and breathe, take care of yourself, do like these meditations when you can, you know, just kind of check in with yourself. Because if you got to take a step back sometimes, you know, it could be it can be difficult, but you know, doing the breathing and the check-in right now, Anna, when you were doing the meditation and everything like that, I was just like taking that time, you know. So thank you for that, and thank you guys for sharing. I really appreciate your guys' share. So, but with that, thank you guys for letting me share. And I just want to ask if there's any insights or any new things that came up from listening to each other. Go ahead, Ann.
That even though we're all so far away from each other, um, I'm like hundreds of miles from closest person, which is Robert. I still have like a shared experience and connection, which makes me feel this alone.
So, go ahead.
I also feel that sometimes because we aren't, or we do the work we do, we are always required to be that stronger person for other people. And in this moment, it feels really nice to have that group of people who have similar experiences of work, to have a conversation where we value our own safety and our own wellness first. It feels really good.
Thanks, Ann. Anybody else? Anything else? Anna, before we go to the next step, do you want to just take us through some breathing, quick breathing exercise?
Yes. Let's just take a couple breaths. Let's put our feet on the floor and sit up in our chair. And please, let's breathe in through our nose. 2, 3, 4. Hold. Now breathe out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do one more. Please breathe out through them. Please breathe in through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Hold and breathe out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you. Forgive me there for a second. I had just started to get relaxed and my voice just got lower and lower. I appreciate all of you.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So I'd like to move us to the next part of our session, and that's kind of a like looking forward, and like for everyone to please identify something that um, learned about yourself, whether it's today or this week or just recently, that's positive. Um, and um, and I'm gonna start with is it Shara, or how do I pronounce your name?
Kiara.
Kiara, sorry. Kiara, would you go first, please?
You said this is something positive that I learned this week.
That you've learned about yourself, whether it was today or sometimes recently.
Yeah, so actually last week I went on a trip out west and I returned to New York over the weekend. And I think something that I've always struggled with is like a dissonance between my interest in work and the academic world and being in a very active city versus like leaning into the side of me that really appreciates nature and is a little bit more laid back, as I was able to do on my trip to Idaho. And I think from from my experience last week, at least, I was reflecting on where I've come to in my recent academic journey and with work, and that it's okay to sit in that dissonance and to feel that way. And to have these two parts of me that may be a little bit conflicting, because there's so much beautiful time in the future to take different paths, whether I choose to stay in the city for 2, 5, 10, 15 years, or choose to divulge from that path. And then that's okay and that's allowed. So I think in terms of what I learned recently, that it's okay to sit in that dissonance and to feel like I have those two conflicting parts of me, and to just to continue exploring each of them, and to continue exploring that dissonance.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Amber, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think something more was like acknowledging and realizing than learning of myself, but I tend to write down my feelings better than I am at articulating them in person. So I tend to write letters before my therapy session, and I tend to go back to those letters and share those letters to my therapist when I'm sharing them, or when I'm having a session. And I've come to realize that in those moments, I am better at acknowledging what I'm feeling when I'm writing down my feelings. So it feels a lot safer on paper. And then it feels like the feeling, especially if it's a negative feeling that I do want it to go away, it goes away quicker when I do write it down. So I've learned that it's almost best for me in moments of crisis, or moments where I feel most alone, to just sit down and write something, even if it's just 2 sentences or 3 sentences of what I'm feeling in the moment. I feel like doing that lets me let go of a lot of anxiety.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Ada, would you like to share?
Today with the meditation and the breathing exercise, I've learned that it helps you relax you better. I think for me, that I don't like being on camera, it helped me be more in tune with myself, to be more relaxed. It also helped me with separating my stress from home and my stress from work, and make me realize that they don't need to be together. You could deal with them separately and be able to work slowly with them. And I appreciate a lot, because I was really under a lot of stress. So I was like, because just like you, Anna, I'm going through personal issues with my mom's health, and I just came back from visiting her, and it wasn't easy to see her the way she's at now. So I try to make things a little better for her, so she would have a nice birthday where she could relax and say, I had a great time. Because it's been a while that she's been under health-wise not good. So I thank you so much for all the breathing exercises because I'm just going to keep doing them.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Robert, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think something I feel good about is just showing up for myself, and continuing helping others. You know what I mean? One of those, I could have easily just shut down and gone to my usual and just stay at home and curl up in a ball and just stay in the dark and not do anything, right? But I chose when I heard the news to get up the next morning and continue to work and show up for everybody else, and from my mom as well. So I think that's something I feel very good about, that I'm continuing to do what I set out to do. And it's one of those things that it could be tough. And when you hear bad news, or when there's someone you can't help, you kind of just want to shut down. And it's one of those things that we can't do that. You know what I mean? So we have to just be there for, first of all, for yourself, and then for each other. So that's what I feel good about. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say that I've learned that it's okay not to be perfect. That I don't have to hold myself to this level of just kind of doing everything right that I expect, because I don't think anybody expects that of me. I mean, it's mostly myself, my self-assigned duty. So I appreciate all of you for coming today and for sharing with all of us. I'm going to do a quick reading for us. It's just to close us out. It's we give thanks for places of simplicity and peace within ourselves. We give thanks for places of refuge and beauty within ourselves. As we go, let us search for these places in the world and in others. May we strengthen and protect them as we depart. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. And, thank you for trusting us with what you've been carrying. I know it takes a lot of courage to share your feelings. And I hope being with us today has helped. So thank you guys. And thanks, Anna, for co-facilitating with me. It's been a pleasure. Dr. Brock, I guess, turn back to you.
All righty. So thank you both. And thank you, Ada, Amber, and Kiara, for being the guinea pigs to be in the demonstration for us. We're going to look at a slide with some questions, but one question came up during the demo, and I noticed some of you were actually sort of semi-participating in the demo, which was lovely to see in the chat. The question that came up in the demo was about the breathing. And one person said that she has a client where the breathing makes her anxious. And I think that can happen. Often people who are carrying a lot of trauma are sitting on it. And so asking them to just pause and calm down may actually have those things surface, and it may make them anxious. So it's important to attend to that. If a person doesn't want to do the breathing, we don't require it, but it does seem to calm most people down. That said, the practice of the breathing we do actually comes out of the mindful tradition of Buddhism, which is sitting meditation, where the breathing is really crucial to the process. But in that tradition, the breathing is always done in a group. not one-on-one or in a therapeutic context, but in a ritualized group setting. And sometimes people who have trouble with the breathing themselves benefit from being in a group of people, because when you're doing this in a group, the process of breathing starts to have everybody's pace of breathing and heartbeat align together, and that is unconscious. Our bodies just do that. And so online, I'm not sure that could work, but if you're in person in a group and you ask people to breathe, it's often the strongest people able to do the breathing and sort of carry everyone else. So that makes doing it in a group, I think, safer and more beneficial to people than asking them to do it one-on-one or alone, like just go home and breathe. So I think that's helpful. The other thing is, a friend of mine who teaches mindfulness in a maximum security prison in Georgia said that he had people who couldn't close their eyes. Closing their eyes terrified them. And in Buddhist practices, you don't have to close your eyes. You just lower your gaze and looks with a soft focus, with a lowered gaze. And so he was able to begin with doing that, giving people the option not to close their eyes, because they couldn't do the breathing. They couldn't do anything if they had to close their eyes because they were afraid. It made them scared to close their eyes. So it's not universally beneficial to people, but when a person is able to get to a point of just counting their breath like that, I do it when I'm driving. So you don't have to sit with your eyes closed in a chair. If something happens in traffic that really upsets me and my heart is racing, I just start doing it in the car. And it really helps me get my blood pressure down and my heartbeat lower. So you can do it in lots of different ways. And it's like anything, it's not universally applicable, but it's generally helpful, and it has been evidence tested with brain EKGs that are sort of EEGs, that it really does change your brainwave patterns. And they find that it actually literally lowers the cortisol, the stress hormone in your body, to do that kind of breathing. So that's just a comment about why we use it. And also the fact that some people may be resistant to it and not able to do it. And you just have to be kind to them about that. Just let them sit there and wait while everybody else breathes, if they're in a group. So the discussion questions we've got, and these are just sort of conversation starters. If you have other questions, you can raise your hand or put them in the chat. And the discussion questions are: what especially resonated with you from the demonstration? What puzzled you or made you wonder? Are there elements from the demo that you can see using in your practice, perhaps adapted for your context? Is it something you might recommend to clients? Is it something like rest? Is something like rest a process you would find helpful yourself in processing moral distress? So those are the discussion questions. And if we can stop the share and we can sort of see if anybody wants to speak and be in the conversation. And I'll invite Anna and Robert to be back with camera on and unmuted, so in case they have answers to questions about the facilitation process, because they're the people who see what, I don't know what happens in the groups. They're the ones that see what happens and what's going on with groups.
I also just wanted to remind everybody that if you want to participate verbally, just use the raise hand function, and then Vanessa will be able to unmute you so that you can share verbally. You're also obviously welcome to participate via the chat as well.
You know, I saw in the chat that some people don't take kind to the meditation, or are not used to it. You know, I was one of them that I wasn't really used to the meditation, and I just kind of eased my way in there with it. So you can start with some light meditations, because there are some ones, and then sometimes you don't even know you're meditating. Sometimes you can just sit outside and just ask the participant to just try to calm their mind a little bit and listen to like the noises, like the white noise from a fan, or the birds, the wind blowing the leaves. That's just some kind of meditation for them. yeah, just ask them what they can hear, but I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just one of those things that is it is hard to get into at first, or some people, can't take to it, but if you ease them into it, they might, get better at it.
Yeah, actually, this happened in the first group that Robert ran the pilot for us with the veterans. There was a labyrinth at the retreat center where we were meeting, and Robert had the idea that maybe they should just do the labyrinth walk. And so we had at least one member of the group had tied a red ribbon on her name tag because she didn't want to be touched. We had them tie yellow, red, or green. Green was hug me, yellow was ask first, and red was I don't want to be touched. And Robert had, and Melissa, his co-facilitator, had the group go in one at a time into the labyrinth about 2 minutes apart so they didn't run into each other, and wait in the middle. And it was one of those large labyrinths. And so they went in, and the facilitators went in last, and then the group kind of clumped in the middle of the labyrinth. And in that, they were just asked to walk the pace of their own breathing. So very slow, deliberative, what you would call a walking meditation pace. And then just to look around and be in the present moment. And that's really the function of the breathing, is to put you in your body in the present moment, and which is really important for processing difficult things. And so when they got into the middle, something had happened on that walk. I don't know what it was, but what the facilitators reported, Robert and Melissa, was that Melinda, sorry, was that the woman who had the red ribbon on her name tag tore it off and said, "I now need a green ribbon." And one of the others that had a green ribbon tore it in half so she could have a green ribbon on her name tag. And then they had a massive, joyous group hug in the middle of the labyrinth. And I don't know why that happened or how that happened. It just did. Is that right? Did I get that right, Robert? You were facilitating that labyrinth walk. Did I get that right? That in the middle they had a big group hug and the red ribbon disappeared?
Yeah, and what I told them too is, as they're walking, this is a pretty tight labyrinth. I don't know if you guys ever walked a labyrinth, but I told them to notice that at the end, did you guys notice that you had someone in front of you, someone beside you, someone behind you the whole time? Like you always have that support system. There's always somebody that's going to cover you and take care of you. And we forget about that. Sometimes we don't think we have a support system, but we do. And yeah, she was so excited. There was a big hug, and then she came to hug me at the end of it, and I was like, it was pretty nice. But yeah, that's pretty much how.
Yeah, so it's there are lots of things you can do, yoga, tai chi, that actually discipline the breath. The point of the breathing, and you can use breath also in these ways to energize people. You can, like, there's power yoga, and there's ways that it's not just one form of breathing. What we use is that particular count of a double exhale time to the inhale with a slight pause at the inhale. That is the particular form of breathing that is supposed to help calm people down. But you can do equal counts, or there's different ways to use the breathing. It's not just but the breathing helps you when you're consciously breathing. You're engaging your autonomic nervous system in ways that you normally don't do, that can slow heartbeat and other things. So the conscious breathing is about that. And so Liana says, what really resonated with me was freedom that Anna felt about sharing the feelings about watching the decline in her mom's health, and to share feeling with so many may feel shame and guilt around. So yeah, I really appreciated Anna's share as well. I think so many of us struggle with these issues. And Victoria says, amazing presentation. Thanks so very much for sharing your lives with us. I can absolutely see this in our practice, big purple heart, because there can be a powerlessness element that compounds moral injury. Do groups ever gravitate toward ideas for collective activism? The source of the harm is so systemic. I thought maybe activism could be healing for moral injury. Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, Christine Tong, who directs the Shea Moral Injury Center at Volunteers America and works with me, is a movement chaplain because she's interested in the role that moral injury plays in activist movements. That's part of the work she does. I think the anger at betrayal, and that's what happens when a system is bad. It betrays you. You're supposed to be able to trust systems to create structures to help people, and then they don't, or they train you to want to do things that you normally would never do, like in the military where you're taught to kill. For good reasons. It's not that that's their job to do those kinds of trainings. But then when you leave, you may feel like, well, why did I want to do that? So there's a lot of guilt and shame attached to that. And the reason that I think moral injury is such an important concept is, even if you were betrayed, the anger that you feel is your conscience engaging. And that anger can, if you can process the moral injury so you're not controlled by the anger, you can use that anger in ways for positive change. I think the risk with moral injury is if you don't process the betrayal, if you don't process the difficult stuff by talking about it and or sharing it or writing about it. Writing's a really good way to process as well, or do art. There are lots of ways to process it. If you don't process those difficult feelings, they drive your behavior rather than you driving your behavior. So that doesn't mean that every time you remember what happened, you don't get angry. Yeah, there are things that you should be angry about. But if you can't figure out, if you're so angry, then it's difficult to think strategically. It's difficult to have the resilience when you fail or things don't go your way, not to be completely defeated again. And that capacity of your conscience to come forward really is helped if you process your feelings around moral injury that are so painful. So I think most of us experience things that might be morally injurious. It's what we really do with those things that makes life matter. And so people who have horrible experiences of moral injury and process them, those experiences teach them things about things they may want to do or changes they may want to make in their lives. But it can also inspire them to do really great things. Anna, you were going to say something.
So I work in homelessness, and I think that it really is applicable across all social classes and experiences, but particularly, and I think in the field of social work, we see it over and over when we see kind of these individuals that kind of get out of crisis and feel kind of haunted, right? And they aren't able to relax or continue to stabilize in the situations that were meant to kind of stabilize them. Whether it's like housing, they've gotten into housing, but now they can't settle there. They worried the person downstairs is following them from room to room, and they're so kind of tortured by that they leave, and it's just this uncomfortable. And then it's sometimes systems that kind of look at that person like, why would you do that? Why would you return? We worked so hard to get you into housing, and then that person feels like more of a failure. And I just think that that's a real clear way that we see kind of people who are especially vulnerable, our most vulnerable community members, whenever they're needing support for whether it's moral injury, trauma, or anything. There isn't anything available for them except for a pill, which kind of implies that the problem is within themselves. And so we'll just increase the dose, right? And you'll be better. But there isn't any access to support, any sort of like specialized trauma therapy, or acknowledge that this person has maybe been sexually assaulted 50 times. And of course, they're, having trouble reintegrating or stabilizing, because there isn't a recovery model that we have yet that that includes their experience. So all they're left with is the physical symptoms of reliving this shame and guilt, that happened because I'm homeless, and that's how come this happened to me. I can't talk about it because I deserve it because I'm a homeless person, and I wear it like a jacket of shame that I don't ever get to take off, right? And I think everybody could see this about me because I'm wearing this jacket of shame, but people don't understand why I behave the way I do, right? Do have these dangerous behaviors, and nobody understands why I'm checked out and don't care, about what happened. And so
Yeah.
I just think that it's so relevant with the people we work with ourselves as we process just being human, and then also with the agony of kind of being confronted with systems, right? We have a responsibility to care for and do our very best for individuals, support them in their growth and recovery, stabilization, right? And yet we are confronted with systems that are not working in that way, right? So we're constantly having to mitigate our own moral compass, to try to be present for this person and be upset about the systemic issues, right? And somehow leave knowing you've done your best when you know that like this doesn't have to be this way, it doesn't have to be this hard.
Yeah, well, here's something someone else said. I totally agree with Anna. I'm a parent partner, and what I do is give parents who are stressed out and feeling overwhelmed the opportunity to share freely about how they are feeling about being a parent in the moment without judgment, so they can clear away the negative aspect of what they are feeling and move into a place of healing and acceptance of their present situation, whatever that may be. I have a friend who's worked for years out of San Quentin prison with people who are in for life sentences, who is convinced that, and he has his group to people who've gone through his program that have come out on probation, and there are a couple of thousand of them. Out of that whole group, only 2 have gone back to prison, which gives him an almost 0 recidivism rate because of his program. And it takes a year in the prison. But what he is convinced that people who are angry and violent and do terrible things have an original trauma from childhood, one of those ACE factors that created this anger that's out of control in them, and they can't deal with it except to express it in really destructive ways. And so he takes them through a process of getting to that trauma, that original trauma. And if they can process that, and it's often quite traumatic. One of my Marine Corps friends, he's told this story publicly, and so I can share it. His father at 6 sat him down and said, "You were born a mistake, and that's why your mother or I are splitting up." And he left, and he never saw his father again. And a few months later, his mother said, "You're just like your father," and stabbed him with a fork in his arm. And so he wound up with his grandparents, who put him in military school. And so that it's that kind of trauma, the kind of fiercely awful trauma that can lead people into behavior that are destructive of themselves or other people. And that's a sort of, I would call also an original moral injury. You have been betrayed by somebody who's supposed to love you and take care of you, and be an adult and be good to you, and then they betray you. And as a child, there's so little you can do about that. So you carry that. And if you don't get a chance to process it, it can lead you to do awful things. And once he's found that it takes him months to get them to that point, and he uses peers, they share with other people, other prisoners who are trained to facilitate the process before they share it with the whole group. But they're asked to make it public and in their group of people who are incarcerated. And he's found that when they get to that point, when they can really own the trauma and say, "This really happened to me and it was terrible and I've carried this for so long," that then they're able to face into the harm they caused other people. So he does victim impact work after he does original trauma. And what I found stunning about his program is because they have gone through this process, they're some of the most emotionally intelligent human beings I've ever met who've gone through the program, and who are able to say flat out what they were in for, which is like almost impossible. You just never ask. You're not, it's an etiquette around never asking and nobody's supposed to tell. And I've had people, I've gone to a couple of they have a graduation after a year, and I've gone to some of those ceremonies where someone will walk up to me and say, you know, I was in because I was in a gang and we used baseball bats and killed someone. And it's like, and I participated. They just are willing to accept that they've done that harm. And that lack of that sense that the shame isn't so deep they could never talk about it, that is so important to the process of recovery, because they got agency now. They have control over their trauma. They own it. They understand that the pain they were in was the good part of them could never get out, and it has finally been able to come out. So there's this, you can have multiple moral injuries, or you can be carrying an moral injury that just affects your life for a very long time. But once you process it, then it's not going to run your life. It's going to be a fact about your life that is true. And you make choices about how you're going to deal with having had that experience, rather than it just driving your behavior. So that's my last word on this. And I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, because I know she wants the last few minutes of time with the rest of you.
Thank you so much. And I just, you know, that was I think like the perfect last words. You know, it's part of your story. It doesn't define your story. And I feel like that's such a great note to end on. Thank you all so much for sharing. Thank you to Anna and Robert for facilitating. I really appreciate all of you. I feel like I've learned and gotten a lot out of today. I want to thank Kiara and Ida and Amber, who had to sign up a little early, for sharing of themselves for our demo. I just really feel like today was a really great presentation. Thank you all so much. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing you all at some of our other presentations. We have some upcoming events on Monday, March 27th. So this coming Monday, we have a conversation about ableism and neurodiversity, diversity and inclusion and mental health. And then we also have an offering on telehealth next Thursday, to telehealth or not to telehealth, supporting child and adolescent mental health providers. And in the last minute or so, you'll see Vanessa has put the link in the chat. Please take a moment to fill out the survey. We really appreciate your feedback. We always take it into account, and this will help to inform future presentations. In particular, we love to hear ideas for things you want to know more about. So thank you to all, and have a great weekend.